what's up, my people? It's a Motley GM. Listen, do you like watching tabletop horror stories? I do. Do you want to avoid some of that stuff and not have unneeded drama in your game and keep the drama to where it belongs between the player characters and the NPCs? Then I hope to give you a little bit of advice here to help with that, because I feel that that's important, and non-adversarial GMs that are having a good time often help make sure that the players also have a good time. So hopefully I can help you with that just a little bit here with some of the tips I found. Now, as watching these horror stories over the past couple of years at least, there's a common thread that I found, and I feel that so many of them can be avoided. And this is usually due to a lack in the GM, whether it's that they don't have the backbone to stand up for themselves or for the other players, or if they're just not a very good GM and don't really understand that what they're doing is wrong. Now, some of these people can grow from this, some don't. Hopefully you're the type that can grow, because on the channel here, we like to promote growth and moving on past bad habits if we've had them in the past. I sure have, and I'm sure everybody has at least one little thing that they have fixed or evolved, or however you want to say it, over their GMing time. And if you're new to this, you will too, so don't feel bad about it. It's okay. As you develop your style, you'll understand that a little bit better. However, the lack of GM intervention in a lot of situations in these horror stories, I think, is a little bit telling of what can be a huge problem. And there are some ways, especially in the modern space, where we could try to fix this, where we play so much in the virtual space. You have access to people, even someone like me who lives out in the middle of nowhere. You know, you have access to people that you can play with. And sometimes it's hard to get that going out there. So I'm hoping maybe some of this will put things in perspective for you. Now, first and foremost, let me tell you, you'll hear a lot of other channels talk about Session Zero, something I also highly recommend. I don't know if I'll do one specifically on Session Zero, but Deck Save Dan, who I'll try to link in the description below, has recently done a video on that I thought really sums it up pretty awesome. Other channels that I've mentioned before, or some of the ones that inspire this channel at least, have also done videos on this. I highly recommend a Session Zero. Now, Session Zero is really for like creating the characters, really setting the world and things like that into play. What I'm suggesting here is a little thing that I started doing after I made let's just say a mistake as a GM, where I didn't protect my players the way I should have. And I'll do a follow-up video where I talk about my own RPG horror story and what kind of brought me to this idea. However, it's a small thing again, and if you want to create a group that's cohesive and that enjoys playing your games, hopefully this little tip will help weed out a lot of those people just right out of the bat. So MGM, what are these negative behaviors you're talking about? Well, in my intro video, if you watched it, if not, no big deal. I talked about I don't allow negative behaviors at my table. It's just something I squashed down right away. And where I don't want to make a comprehensive list, because in all actuality, people are dynamic, and your game that you run as a GM might be completely opposite to the way that I run my games. So I want to give some general ideas here, mostly to point you in a direction. And we'll see if that works out. I hope it will. So some of the key phrases or key words you might hear in a lot of these horror stories are like spotlight hog, main character syndrome, edgelord, murder hobo, side seat GM, things like that. You hear these things, they all describe a specific type of person, but most of the time, these are people that basically think my thoughts, my ideas are in charge of everybody else's, no matter what anybody says. Now, even the GM, I don't feel should claim that right 100%. You know, I like the players adding to the world, to the lore, and even to the places. And I'll do a video where I talk more about that and expand on it, because it's a multifaceted thing. These are some of the terms that you're going to hear when you see these tabletop horror stories, or listen to them, I should say. Now, a lot of it just does boil down to people that want their own way and don't want to cooperate. And they have a difficult time grasping that tabletop RPGs are, by default, a collaborative game. Not only the players collaborating with each other, but the players also collaborating with the GM. And when you have a person that just doesn't want to do that, I would just say automatically ask them to leave your game or just kick them if that's what it comes down to. But don't accept those types of behaviors. If they're people that are always trying to insert their politics or beliefs into games, or real world politics and beliefs into the game, especially if your world doesn't include that and they're trying to like force it in there. If people who think that old racist and misogynistic ideas belong in tabletop games, then for me personally, especially, I just think that's already a red flag. And you're probably not going to fit in with my personal group. If that's the kind of game you run, I would not want to play in that game personally. But hey, you know what? It is what it is. I don't. So I feel like when people are trying to force that stuff on other people, and ones that basically just decide when they're going to roll, there's no respect for the GM, no respect for the other players. These are the people I'm talking about. And those are what I consider negative behaviors. Ones that are basically stemming from one or two people that are ruining it for everybody else through one form or another, trying to essentially get their own way. That's the easiest way I think I could boil down how this idea kind of culminates in my mind. So those are like what I would consider negative behaviors, things that are negatively affecting your game and or the table, whether it's virtual table or in-person table. So you might be like, MGM, okay, well, how do I deal with this? Well, let me tell you. As a GM, I think you should decide very early on exactly what it is that you will and or will not do in a game, and write it down immediately. It doesn't have to be a long list, but just a list of those things that you just automatically won't do. I have one that I have on my Discord personally, and I'll give you what I have there in a little bit here. But whether you have a Discord like I do where you guys talk and where you meet up for games, whether you're on some other kind of video chat device, however you do it, I would say in writing would be best, where you could post it somewhere where players can see it and read it right away. This is something you have them read immediately. You don't do it during session 0. This is something like, if you want to play in my game, you read this and you have to accept it. That's really the simplest way I could put it, but this is the simple, small thing that I started after I made the mistake of letting somebody in my game that really didn't fit my group. What I'm suggesting is make sure you have that in writing where somebody can actually read it right away and agree to it before session 0. Right? Session 0 will come next, but the instant you're like, hey, you're coming into my game, hey, read this. Direct them to the Discord post, email them, put it on a DM somewhere, however you do it. Just make sure they read it and accept it before your session 0 starts. That's really the simple thing I'm trying to give you here. Now, how I deal with some of these players, and this is what I suggest, and if you're a timid person, then I would say that's something you have to let go a little bit of as a GM if you want to be the one that's in charge of the game. And that's kind of what you are. Without the GM, there is no game, right? So you do have a somewhat leader position here. Even if there's more collaboration than not, you are somewhat of a leader. You do adjudicate the rules, so they look at you as if you are a leader. So that's a role you have to fill. If you're a timid person and think you need somebody to back you up, that's totally fine. But in a world where we often play on virtual tabletops and you can literally just kick somebody with no actual interaction at all, I don't think it's as hard as it may have been when it was a friend's friend at a table per se. Now, I'm still the type of person that if it's a friend at a table and they're doing something that I don't like and they continue to disrupt the game, I will gladly ask them to leave my table, the place that we're at, whatever it is, but I will gladly ask somebody to leave. And again, I do this to protect the good players that show up and want to play my game. That's why I do it, and I think that's why you should do it. How can we avoid some of these things? Of course, by the list that I'm talking about here, and by the session 0. The combination of those two things, I feel, nip everything in the bud right away. Make sure there's no question going on as to what games will contain and what it's going to be about, and allows you to have a group of people who are on board with that immediately. And I think that's what makes great games. Another way you can try to avoid this a little bit is only bring somebody on as a trial, right? You're not necessarily offering a seat at your table. You're just seeing how they do. Maybe you're teaching them the game, whatever it is you want to say, but only give them a trial run. if they don't even click with the group, let's say, right? Because that's the thing. Your group wants to click. If there's somebody that's just too awkward with the group, even if they're a good player, you might not want that person to play because that does ruin the fun for everybody else. And that's not being mean. That's just being honest, right? Not everybody shares the same sense of humor. So if that person is the one person that's totally off on that, then that person shouldn't play in your game. So having a trial run per se is a good way to see if they fit, and just let that be known right away. I'm not necessarily offering you a full-time seat at my table. I am giving you a trial run to see how you do with my group. And I think that's a very fair way to put it. Just be upfront about it right away. And that's the big thing I want to get here, is just be upfront and specific right away, but not too specific. When I say specific, like say the things you specifically will not deal with and let them know. That being said, I think that a good way to start a group is 2 people. And I feel personally that 2 people is enough to run adventures with. And I will do a video on that, hopefully down the road here, where I talk a little bit more in depth about that. However, 2 people I feel are good to have an adventure with. It's preferable if those people are family members or friends. Wherever you know them from, if they're people you get along with, if you have a rapport with already, and you have a good sense of humor with, you guys typically get along well, that's a good core group. Now, there's other ways to do that, of course. If you don't have anybody and you're looking brand new, maybe joining a couple of games online and finding players that you get along with and then inviting them to your game could work. Try your best to find at least 2 people that you know you share a good rapport with. That will be your core group in my eyes. That's the way I look at it. And then from there, you're going to build on that. And you're going to want to have people join that group that click really well with those people. By click, I mean, they have a good sense of humor. They're able to joke with each other easily. And that doesn't happen all the time, or sometimes it takes a few sessions before it does. That's why I suggest the trial as well. This is a good way to try to build a group that's going to enjoy playing your game and want to come back over and over again. Now, if you're just running games that absolutely stink, you can't build a group no matter what, because they'll leave sooner or later. And hopefully some tips I have down the road will also help with that. But when we're talking about having a good group, we want to make sure we weed out the people that just won't fit in. This isn't to be mean to anybody. I mean, it stinks when you have to exclude somebody. But at the same time, for the rest of your group and wanting to keep a cohesive group, it's necessary. And as a GM, you have to take on that role a little bit. So what are the things that I just do not do in my games personally? And what do I have on my Discord? To put it out there just very basically, some things that I will not put in my games are sexual content of any kind. All right, including the stuff that you're not supposed to mention on YouTube and stuff like that. No kind of sexual content in my games. The best I will allow is fade to black scenes if like a player's having romantic interludes or is forming a relationship. But that's about it. I really don't allow anything like that. I don't even put prostitution in my games. I know what people say, it's the oldest profession, this, that. I just don't do it. I just feel that, we're playing adventures. I get where in a lot of adventure books and fantasy stories that's involved. And again, romance is fine, but I draw the line there. And I just think that makes it comfortable for everybody else. It makes it nice and easy. Just don't have it at all. I don't involve real world politics or religions. And I mean that in a very broad sense, of course. So by politics, not only do I mean American politics specifically, which I unfortunately have to hear about enough all the time, but I also mean worldwide and even historical. So I don't include racist or misogynistic ideology in my games. I don't think that belongs in fantasy games. So when I say that, I mean all of that stuff, right? Any of that real world politics or religion doesn't belong in fantasy in my opinion. And now I know there'll be tons of people that'll argue this. Oh, there's alternate reality. There's this, there's that. That's fine. I still don't believe it has any place in tabletop games. Those things can easily be taken out and you can still have a really good, fun game. So that's something else I do not have in the game. And also, I'm not a person that runs what a lot of people call evil games. Now, I'm totally fine with moral ambiguity. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm totally fine with your roguish like lovable silver-tongued rogue type of character that may not always, have the best in mind for everybody, but they're not really hurting anybody. Nothing wrong with that. Moral ambiguity is okay, but straight up evil campaigns, just not something that I would ever like to do. I tried that shortly once and found it was not for me. If that's your thing, then I would say include that in your list. That's something that you do enjoy doing or that you do primarily, however you do that. For me, it's not something that I do. To read exactly what I have on my Discord, and this is how I put it, I basically have 6 points on there. The first one, under a heading, some general things to know about my game. The first one says, we are a group of friends that have been playing together for years. And that's true now. If you're not, of course, you don't have to include this, but I'm just giving you what I have. Because I've been very fortunate and blessed to have a very good core group, and I've been able to build off of that so far well. And I hope to continue to do that. And if you're watching, guys, I love you guys. You're the best players ever. I really enjoy having you as players. But that's my first one. Second one. We are typically heavy roleplay, but no romantic, erotic roleplay, please. There's none included in my games. Number 3, the GM/referee has final say on rulings guided by Rule 0. Rule 0 is, of course, all rules are basically guidelines, and GM always can change whatever he wants. Some people call that the first rule. I call that Rule 0 personally, and I say in my Discord that they can always ask me to clarify. Number 4, like I just said earlier, real world politics and religion have no place in our fantasy worlds. Please respect this. Number 5, I point out, no evil characters, please. Sorry, this is a bummer, but past experiences led me to know that running evil campaigns and characters is just not for me. Morally ambiguous is okay. And then number 6 is just, we enjoy showing new players tabletop RPGs. And that's just true. We like to have people come on and just teach them the game. I've done that a couple times. We had a couple people come in and play a few games to just learn the system. And that's always nice and fine. And a lot of times they don't necessarily fit in with the group, but at least they had an experience to learn how to play the game, and they could take that as they move on. So that's what I do on my Discord, and I suggest you do the same thing. Again, whether it's Discord, however you communicate it, write down the things that you will or won't do, or things that will give you a basic understanding of who you are as a GM, or what you are willing to do, what lines you are not willing to cross even. Or if you're a person that really enjoys crossing those lines, include that, because you'll want to weed it out the opposite way. You'll want the people that want that stuff instead. That's not my style, but of course I promote you to do your style, just to do it in an easy, fun way, the best that we can in this crazy world that we live in. So what are my final thoughts on all this stuff? I think the GM does have a responsibility to the players that come to their games, that show up and want to play in their world, in their game, the way that they're running it. And I think it's important that you as a GM protect those players, because without doing that, you're showing them that you're more concerned about your own world than people actually playing in it. And if that's the case, write a campaign book, write a novel. That's fine if you want to do that, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about building good groups and being upfront about who you are as a GM, because as a GM, you do have to take on that bit of a leadership mantle, and you need to exercise that leadership in a way that's healthy for you and your players. I also don't believe that one bad player should ruin an entire campaign, shouldn't ruin a table, and shouldn't ruin the experience for the good players. So we want to weed those types of people out immediately. And again, a combination of what I'm suggesting here, the small list that you have players read right away, and then a session 0, you combine these two ideas and you weed out the players that are just going to cause drama. If after all of that, people continue to want to act in ways that are negative to the table, you just dismiss them. Don't give them any more chances. They've seen everything, what you're about, and agree to it. If they go against those things, it's time for them to leave. Plain and simple. Don't waste any more time. This is for your players that are there. Don't let them ruin that experience. It's okay to do that. And it's okay to ask for help from your core players if you need to. There's nothing wrong with that. We want the group to be cohesive. We want everybody to get along and like each other. Right? I would like to take a moment to give a shout out to some of the channels that inspired this idea. And again, I want to follow this up with my own horror story, and I don't know how that'll go. It's going to be weird, but I'm going to give it a try. However, Den of the Drake, awesome channel. Probably definitely one of my favorite channels, period. Sir Knox, another great one that I don't think gets enough love. Same thing with Crow's Perch. He's an awesome guy, and I love listening to his tabletop horror stories. And Crit Crab, you've been around for a while, and I love you too, buddy. You guys are awesome, and you have inspired my thoughts on this. So I'm going to link them in the description below. Please go check these guys out. And if you haven't listened to some of these, please do. You'll kind of understand where I'm coming from a little bit here. A little better if you check out some of their stories and what they do out there and what they contribute to the community here. Because you know what? They're doing good work out there, darn it. So good job, guys. But let me encourage you GMs. All right, players, if you see a GM having negative behaviors that are ruining a game for you, just leave the game. Yeah, it stinks, but you know, the old saying goes, and I'll kind of modify it here a little bit, no tabletop gaming is better than bad tabletop gaming. And I feel that's true. So GMs out there, be strong, be firm. You don't have to be mean. Don't be a dick about it, right? But you can still be firm and protect the players that you want to keep playing your games and playing the campaigns that you spent time, you know, and energy creating. So you don't want people to ruin that. Be strong. Not like these guys from the horror stories. But you want to do that for both you and your players so all of you can continue to play for fun first. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.